Hey YouTube, what's up guys? Corey Allen, Moss Street Gallery. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about art supplies, namely these things here called palette knives. What is a palette knife and what would you use a palette knife for when doing a painting? Well, palette knives are really cool. They're a very versatile tool and you can do a lot of things with them when you're creating art. They're also great for mixing your paint. If you have your palette with your colors on it, you can use it as a tool to mix your oil paints. You can also use them directly on your canvas as well, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about besides just mixing paint with them. They're really cool tools. You can do a lot with them. They really give a dramatic effect when you're doing oil paintings. You can do thick lines with them. And let's talk about sizes though with them. They come in all kinds of different shapes, sizes. You have smaller ones that do different stuff. They all have kind of different edges to them. You have larger ones. I will say a smaller one like this is really good for mixing your paint. You can get in there and kind of mix and blend colors really well with a small palette knife. They even come in crazy sizes and shapes like this one. This one is like, you can scrape along and make lines with it and stuff. And they make other varieties of this to do other kind of strange things with it. And I will say if you get palette knives, you need a variety of them to do different things and for different parts of your canvas too, what you're trying to create. These are metal ones, which I would recommend. They also make plastic ones, which they're no good. I don't really like them at all. They even make rubber palette knives. They're almost more like a brush with a rubber end on them. And you just don't get the smoothness that you get from metal. These are a lot easier to clean too. And you can just get a really clean edge when you're using your palette knife. So I'd recommend the metal ones. Stay away from the cheap plastic ones. They do get pricey, especially when you get a bunch of different sizes. So, but the metal ones are what you want to go with. So let's talk a little bit about mixing paint with a palette knife. It really works great for mixing your paint. And if you have a palette, hence the name palette knife. So a palette are those big wooden things or plastic things artists have. You'll see their paints all around it. I actually did another video about paints, which I talk a little bit about palettes and what you could do with them. But you see artists, they have their palette, and it's really great for mixing your paint on your palette. You can smooth it out really well, and it's just a really great tool for mixing your paint that you can blend and use for different parts of your oil painting. Now let's talk about using these on a canvas though. You have your artwork there and you get really dramatic effects with a palette knife. And you can also do subtle things too with a palette knife. It's really nice because you can put a little bit of paint on the edge of these and they make a really nice straight line. You might see people doing trees or something like that and they can make the edges of the tree. When you're doing water, it's a way to blend the paint across. It's a great tool for like pulling your paint, kind of cutting it, and you just get a real dramatic look when you use a palette knife. Here are a few examples of what I do with a palette knife. You'll see some of these paintings, these brass band paintings, where I just use a lot of bright colors. And what I do kind of with the palette knife, and other artists might do this as well, is I actually take the tube of paint and put it and squeeze it directly on the canvas. Then I just start pulling the paint across the canvas, and you just get a really dramatic, bold effect. You're not even using a palette, you're using the canvas to mix your paint, you could say. But you have to be careful when you do this because if you start playing with it a little too much, everything gets muddled and kind of blends together. And it just doesn't look good anymore. So if you want the colors to really pop or shine through, you just have to be very subtle with your palette knife as you pull it across. So those are palette knives. Check those out and please subscribe.